Hi, everybody. I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Calvin coming to you from Houston, Texas with your update on Tropical Storm Karl for Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. Hard to believe that we're still talking about tropical systems, but the hurricane season goes all the way till the end of November. So we've got about a month and a half left. I will say, though, it is pretty unusual to see development here. So we're looking in the Bay of Campeche. This is the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. And this thing's barely moving here, nearly stationary, moving to the north at 3 miles per hour. And it's a 60 mile per hour storm right now. So it is starting to strengthen just a bit. Earlier this morning, it was a 40 mile per hour storm, so just barely a tropical storm. And you can see it's definitely started to improve that look on satellite. We've got more of a consolidated core here in the center as opposed to where it was this morning, where you had a couple storms up here and it was a lot of dry air getting wrapped in. Now it is starting to look a little healthier on satellite. So big question is, with it so close to us here in Houston, Texas, with it so close to the southern United States, where is it going? Well, it's actually going to turn around. So even though we have a north movement right now at about 3 miles per hour, we're expecting the storm to kind of turn around and head south. So it's going to do a little bit of a hook, and the reason for that is a cold front that's coming through the southern U.S. So as it turns around and moves onshore here in Mexico, it's actually going to weaken as it gets closer to that landfall time. So we're expecting landfall sometime around Friday night, Saturday morning, and this is really just going to be rain with a name. It's going to be a rainstorm with a name. We're not talking about big wind damage. We're not talking about storm surge, but there is a flooding potential, especially as that moisture butts up the mountains here as we get into southern Mexico. This is going to be just to the south of Mexico City. Rainfall potential is pretty impressive exactly where we have that landfall point. Because it's such a small storm, we're not expecting a big footprint here. So notice to the south of Veracruz, as you get farther inland, getting towards Oaxaca, we're talking about the potential for some flash flooding, again, as it butts up against that mountain chain right in this area. But once you get on the other side of the mountains, those rainfall totals really drop off. So the flooding threat really here on the Gulf Coast of southern Mexico, just around Veracruz as we go through the weekend. And then, by Sunday and Monday, this thing kind of falls apart. The moisture is still there, so we could see rain chances enhanced through southern Mexico. But all in all, Mexico City, which is well up to the north, that should stay dry. We should stay mainly dry there, just a couple shower chances, but really the heavy rain down there to the south. Okay, so the big question is, why isn't this going to impact the U.S.? Why is it going to turn around? It's going north right now. How is it going to do that total 180? It has to do with the cold front. As I mentioned, it's right back there above the banner. So there's our system. The black lines here indicating the pressure points around it. So the more lines you see, the tighter they are, the stronger the system. And all of this green in here, that just indicates a lot of atmospheric moisture. That moisture is going to pool ahead of this cold front. All right, so we're not expecting rain, and we're not expecting tropical conditions. All that green just indicates tropical moisture in the atmosphere. That's associated with Karl, but the core for Karl is going to be very small. As that cold front dives south through the weekend, it pushes Karl and that associated tropical moisture to the south. Notice behind the front, we're talking about no tropical moisture. In fact, very, very dry air, at least briefly so for the southern U.S. And that really tropical moisture associated with that system, again, gets pushed to the south, and ultimately this is not going to be a threat to the U.S. And that's typically the story this time of year. Once we get into October, once we get into November, we start to see cold fronts become a little more common in this part of the world. And so the threat for hurricanes and tropical storms, especially if you've lived in Texas long enough, that threat really isn't something that we have to worry about once we get beyond the middle part of October. So we look to the rest of the Atlantic. Is there anything else going on? Well, the short answer is no. We're not expecting any other type of development out here in the Atlantic, in the main development region. Just a few showers here across the middle of the Atlantic, a weak wave coming off the west coast of Africa, but none of that expected to turn into anything over the next 48 hours to 5 days. So where do we typically look this time of year for development? Typically the Western Caribbean. And again, if you watch these videos, we did one a few days ago where we actually showed you this map and we talked about the reason why, if anything were to develop in this part of the world, it takes these paths. And it has to do with exactly what we're seeing as we get into tomorrow and Friday. And it's that cold front. So when you've got these cold fronts diving south across the U.S., that helps to take any system that does potentially develop in this part of the world, and it scoops it up the coast, and it scoops it out to sea. So again, the threat really starts to diminish this time of year for places like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Florida, though, still does have to keep their guard up because fronts don't always make it that far south, not until typically the end of October and November. But it is very rare, or at least pretty rare, to see development in this part of the world, which is where Karl is right now. And the only reason why we see development there is because it's actually remnant moisture from what was Julia as it crossed over Central America. If you remember that happened last week. Julia crossed over Central America. We got a piece of moisture that broke off over the Yucatan. That moved over the Bay of Campeche, and that's now what Karl is. But again, as that cold front comes through, this is not going to be an issue for the United States. Just a good rainstorm, though, for southern Mexico. So where are we in the season? Well, the peak of the season is September 10th. We are on a pretty good slope getting out of the peak of the season right now. I would say once we get past the next week or so, things really typically start to quiet down. And the season, of course, again, as I said in the beginning, does not end until November 30th. But again, once we get beyond mid-October, activity drastically quiets down. And that just has to do with you got a lot more disruptions in the atmosphere going on with cold fronts moving across the United States. That introduces a lot more wind shear to the atmosphere. And so it makes it a little more challenging for tropical systems to develop. And plus, water temperatures start to cool down. So a lot of things start to work against tropical formation, hurricane development. So I think we are finally starting to, we're on the downward slope towards some quieter activity here. But of course, we'll still keep our eyes to the sky and our eyes to the tropics here. We'll still keep our guard up until the end of the season. But right now, for Houston, Texas, at least, it looks like things are going to be quiet. So that is it. A rainstorm headed for southern Mexico as we get into the next few days. Nothing else in the tropics. Thank you for watching. You can always get more information by downloading the free KHOU 11 Plus app. That's for Fire TV and Roku. You can follow along on this YouTube channel for tropical updates, and you can always follow us on social media. Thanks for watching.